All right, Diana Chen McNally joins me now, homelessness advocate and community advisor based in Toronto. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. Really do appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So you just heard me there talking about the mayor, Olivia Chow. Seemingly, it seems like parties have come to the table. More talks happening on Tuesday. Is that giving you some hope?
I am hopeful because I'm an optimistic person, but at the same time, we don't know what the commitments are actually going to look like. And as was mentioned in the earlier story, there's a substantial financial hole that the city of Toronto is facing. And on top of that, we need at least $157 million to address the fact that we have this shelter crisis. We need to fund shelter for refugees who, as we see, are now sleeping out on the sidewalks. So I'm going to hold out hope,
Yeah.
but we'll see.
How do things get to this point? You've got people that are escaping horrific conditions, running for their lives. They're now living on the street, and they're in fear once again.
Yeah, we've had a shelter system that has been at capacity now for over a decade. So the fact that it's full is no surprise to anyone who's been doing this work for quite a long time. And I've been doing this for 9 years. I think what's different now is that because we have all of these refugees who are coming here because they know Canada to be a place where we uphold human rights. They're coming here specifically because they know Canada to be a welcoming country. But at the same time, we don't have room in the shelter system for them. And these folks are basically falling through the cracks. We've had the city of Toronto say, unless the federal government commits the funding for shelter for these people, they are not going to allow them into the system. And we actually actively see some profiling of people who are asylum seekers, and they're withheld shelter space because of their status.
What more are they telling you? Tell us some of the stories that you've been hearing over the years that you've been doing this.
I mean, as you said, the situations that people are fleeing are really, really traumatic. And I can't emphasize this enough. What we're seeing in particular with a lot of the folks who are outside, one, they are almost exclusively from African nations. And two, we have a large influx of people from Uganda who are LGBTQ. And so we know that there's a new law in Uganda that is basically anti-LGBTQ. And people are coming here because they're fleeing persecution based on their sexual orientation. So again, the trauma that people are facing is high level. Then they get here and they're sleeping out in the sidewalk. So I'm thinking of people over the last few days who've been sleeping out in the rain. And what they've told me is that security guards will not let them fully cover their face with a tarp because it's a security risk if they can't actually see their face. So they're actually forced to expose themselves to elements in which they can get sick.
In the rain, we know that there's been extreme heat. They have very little access to be able to get in and out of those shelters. We know they're getting some food and I guess access to, to washrooms and whatnot. When we're looking at part of the solutions here, and we bring the government at all levels on this, Toronto seems to be the hub, but what about providing other options, other areas elsewhere in Canada that could perhaps meet the needs of these people more immediately? Should that be an option? And if it is, why is it not on the table?
Honestly, a lot of other municipalities are dealing with similar issues. So we know in Durham region, for example, Niagara, they're struggling with the same problems that we are, and they're not seeing federal commitments either. Montreal, similarly, there's a huge influx of people going there. We know in Vancouver, we're seeing similar situations. So this is actually a national issue. And while we're talking about the context of 129 Peter Street and Toronto more specifically, it's not unique. And so I think this is why, especially for us who are working in civil society organizations, doing this frontline work, we are specifically calling on the federal government to step up because we know that there are unmet needs across the entire country and people are effectively being stranded.
Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino did say that, the government is listening, that there's going to be some action taken. No direct commitment to funding here. Is that steps forward here? We know we're in the summer months here, so the House is not sitting, but clearly this is being called a crisis. Do you think the Prime Minister should be stepping up to the microphone right now to make an announcement?
Absolutely. I don't even think it should have gone on this long. Now, I don't agree with the city of Toronto having used these people's lives as bargaining chips. They basically withheld shelter from them so that they would get federal money. That was inappropriate. It's egregious in terms of human rights. But really, the federal government should have been motivated long time ago to actually provide the funding that's needed. This is not an issue that we didn't anticipate. We know that we're touting ourselves on the world stage as a place that is safe for people to come. And if we're doing that, then we must commit the resources to ensure that everybody is safe and well.
What would you say to the new mayor now, Olivia Chow?
Please We cannot let this go on any further, regardless of whether or not the federal government steps up, and the province as well, because they have commitments too. Regardless of whether they step up, we cannot leave people out on the sidewalk indefinitely. We know that it's going to be costly in the long run, let alone the fact that people's health and welfare are going to suffer greatly. So we have to bring people indoors and give them resources immediately.
Still a couple of days until further meetings happen. We know that the mayor has said that she's pushed and said things have to happen immediately. We need to get them housing. We know that the premier, Doug Ford, has talked about saying more and more housing needs to be built, and it needs to be built immediately. It does, but that's going to take quite a bit of time. What are you going to be watching for over the next few days here? Just being out on the street for a few hours has one vulnerable, and we have to remember and remind our viewers, children are on the street as well.
Yeah, definitely. The folks who are out on the street are very vulnerable, and they're of all ages. What I'm looking for is that federal commitment to actually come in. I think anything less than that is going to not be nearly enough. We also have to understand that because we have refugees who are entering the traditional shelter system, that we have these different groups who are competing for space. They're of the same group. Everybody here is unhoused, but ultimately, if we can create separate shelter space for refugees and respond to their unique needs, it'll also free up space in our baseline shelter system so that we can accommodate more people overall. So this isn't just about a refugee housing crisis. It's about homelessness more generally and ensuring that there's enough space for absolutely everybody. So that federal commitment is absolutely necessary. But barring that, I would like to see an emergency response deployed now. The City of Toronto has an Office of Emergency Management. Why are they not on the situation right now? That is their purview, and I would like to see that office deployed to support people immediately.
We're going to be watching things very closely. Diana, I appreciate you giving us your time today. Diana Chan McNally, a homelessness advocate and community advisor based in Toronto. Diana, thank you again for this.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.